In this lesson, we're going to look at the organization of plants. So let's just review the hierarchy of life, right? We're fairly familiar with this, especially when it applies to humans, right? We know that the cell is the basic unit of life, and then cells get grouped together into tissues, which then come together to create organs, which then a bunch of organs together make an organ system, which carries out a specific overall function. And then all of that comes together to make an organism. So the same thing happens in plants. Right? We're familiar with it in humans, right? We have the heart, which is part of the circulatory system, different organs. Okay, so plants also have organs and organ systems. So that's what we're going to look at. So let's start with the cell. So we've talked about plant cells before, and we know that they have specialized organelles that animal cells do not have. Particularly, they have chloroplasts, which allow plants to carry out photosynthesis. They have cell walls, which help the plant to stand upright. And they have central vacuoles, which fill with water and also help the plant to stand upright. So there are specialized cells within a plant called meristematic cells. So just as animals contain unspecialized cells called stem cells, plants have unspecialized cells called meristematic cells. So in animals, they're stem cells. In plants, they're meristematic cells. And they're found in the meristems. So meristematic cells are constantly producing more cells by mitosis, which then differentiate into cells with specialized function, just like stem cells do in animals. Right? Stem cells are constantly making more stem cells by mitosis, and then they can differentiate to have a specialized function. So the locations where these cells are found in the plant are called meristems. They're found in three main locations. So they're found in the tips of roots. So these are the root apical meristems, and they help the roots grow longer. They're found in the tips of stems to help the plant grow taller or bushier, and these are called the shoot apical meristems. And then finally, you have a layer around the stem, which is helping the plant grow thicker, and these are called the lateral meristems. So moving away from cells, we now start cells grouped together to make tissues. So these specialized cells that are produced by the meristematic cells combine to form three types of tissues found in the body of a plant. So there's dermal tissue, ground tissue, and vascular tissue. So this diagram shows those tissues in the various regions of the plant. And now we'll look at each of them individually. So dermal tissue, which is shown in the image as the darker, like the orangey brown color. So as you can see, it is forming the outermost layer of the plant. It protects the inner tissues of the plant from damage, and it's controlling the exchange of water and gases between the plant and its environment. Moving on to the ground tissue. So this is the lighter brown tan color in the diagram. So you can see that it makes up the majority of the plant, and the function of the ground tissue depends on where it is found in the plant. So in the stem, it's going to provide strength and support. In the roots, it's storing food and water. And in the leaves, it's performing photosynthesis. And then moving on to the vascular tissue, which is the green in the image. So just like our vascular system transports things around our body, that's what the vascular tissue does in a plant. So it's transporting water, nutrients, sugars throughout the plant. There are two types, and we'll look at these in more detail in another lesson. But there's xylem, which transports water and minerals from the roots up to the stem and leaves. So it goes in that one direction from the roots up. And then there's the phloem, which transports organic materials like sugars throughout the plant, both up and down. So now the next step, the tissues come together to make plant organs. Okay, so there are 4 plant organs that each perform a special function for the plant. So the first plant organ are the roots, and then we have the stem, the leaves, and the flower. So we'll look at each of those individually and talk about what their main role is. So the roots anchor the plant in the soil. It collects water and minerals from the surrounding soil and transports it to the stem. So in order to do this, it needs a big surface area for lots of area for the water and minerals to come into the roots. So roots will have root hairs. So they're an extension of the root, and they're small and they increase the surface area for absorption. There's a lot of them. The roots also store food that is made in other parts of the plant. And the tip of the root is covered by a root cap in order to protect the meristematic cells below it. Because if you think about the root like digging through the ground, kind of trying to get longer, we don't want it to damage those meristematic cells. So there's a root cap which leads the way. So here's some images of a root, right? And in the one image, you can see that root cap at the bottom, and then the meristematic cells, which are dividing and making the root longer right in behind that. And then you've got the root hairs all over the root. And in the cross section, you can see those root hairs. They're extensions of the dermal tissue along the outside. And we've got the ground tissue and the vascular tissue in the center. Now on to the stem. So the stem transports water and nutrients throughout the plant. The dermal tissue on the outside is going to create a waxy substance called the cuticle. And so this is a protective coating, and it's preventing water from being lost. Right? So the stem's transporting the water up to the leaves, and you don't want that water to get lost. So that's what the cuticle is for. The stem also supports the leaves and the flowers so they can find the sun, right? The leaves can find the sun to do photosynthesis. So here's a cross-section of a stem. So you've got the cuticle on the outside, the dermal tissue just inside of that, and you've got ground tissue and a ring of the vascular tissue. And we will look also more closely at the structures of roots and stems in another lesson. Next, we have the leaves. So specialized ground tissue called mesophyll performs photosynthesis. Right? So in the leaves, that's the role of the ground tissue, is to perform photosynthesis, and it's specialized. It's called mesophyll. So there's a reminder of what photosynthesis is. Carbon dioxide and water is creating glucose and oxygen. So the vascular tissue is bringing in the water and bringing it up. That's where the water comes from. Glucose is then going into the vascular tissue, being brought to the rest of the plant. In terms of the carbon dioxide and oxygen, those are the carbon dioxide's coming in and the oxygen is going out through openings in the dermal tissue called stomata. And those stomata are controlled by guard cells, which open and close the stomata. And we will also look at that in more detail in another lesson. So here's a cross-section of a leaf. So you've got the cuticle in a leaf as well, which is on top of the dermal tissue. We've got the specialized ground tissue called the mesophyll, which is carrying out photosynthesis. We've got vascular tissue. The stomata are the openings in the dermal tissue, and the opening and closing of those is controlled by guard cells. The flower is our last plant organ. So this is the reproductive structure of the plant. It contains both male and female organs and produces seeds through sexual reproduction. And some seeds then become surrounded by a fruit. So finally, the plant organ systems. So the plant has 2 organ systems, the shoot system and the root system. So the shoot system includes everything that is above the ground, the stem, leaves, buds, flowers, fruits. And it's responsible for supporting the plant, performing photosynthesis, transporting water, minerals, and sugars. Whereas the root system is everything below the surface of the ground, and it's responsible for anchoring the plant, taking in water and minerals from the ground, and storing food. And those two plant systems work together, just like in our body, our systems work together, right? Our respiratory system brings in oxygen and our circulatory system transports it around. Okay? Similarly, the root and shoot systems work together. They're connected by the flow of water, minerals, and sugars through vascular bundles that contain xylem and phloem. So, vascular bundles that start in the roots continue up into the shoot system. Maintaining that flow of water up a plant is essential for a plant to survive. So, both of those systems need to be working together in order for the plant to survive. So, there's the introduction to the overall organization of a plant.